Well, good morning and welcome to another Sunday morning life class. We are a couple of months in our series on reparenting ourselves. And the reason that we are doing this is because in growing up in complex trauma, often we were not taught the tools we needed. And often certain needs were not met. So we need to learn how to meet those needs. We need to learn to use the tools that we need to be healthy. So that's the reparenting process. And today, what I want to cover and talk about is a word that was often thrown around in our home growing up, but nobody knew how to do it, and that word is balance. And I know that we all feel like at no time in history has it been more appropriate than in this digital age is the word balance. So, as a parent, as they train their children, they want them to understand that a healthy life requires balance. And what that assumes is that every person has very different needs, your mental, your physical, your spiritual, your intellectual, your relational, and we have different responsibilities that become a part of our lives. So if I'm going to be healthy, I have to meet all of those needs, and I have to fulfill those responsibilities. But have you noticed, there are only 24 hours in a day, and nobody gets more or less than the others. And as I approach 70, I notice more and more, I just don't have that same energy on some days. I have people in their 30s tell me that too. This is a stressful world. So our energy is limited, and we have to meet all those needs and responsibilities within a certain number of hours, and with the energy we have. So there's something here that people didn't think about maybe in the past. We have to train ourselves to balance all those different things. So now it's more like being a juggler, right, in your own life. And this feeling of, I've got to keep all these balls in the air at one time. And if one ball drops, or if I just focus on one ball, then all these other balls are going to drop and my life will be a mess, and it will be a catastrophe. And so we start doing something which is a form of distorted thinking called catastrophization. Okay? So we all do this. Some people are more prone to doing it than others. So part of life is learning balance. And we have had some in-depth study on the brain, particularly on the three parts of the brain. I'll do a little review for you here. What I want you to hear is that balance happens when we think with our cortex. If we are in our limbic brain, we will not have a balanced life. So those of you who are listening online, many of you today, I am going over a handout that I gave early on about the three parts of the brain. I am just simply pointing out that the cortex, which controls and stores facts, processing logic, and problem solving, is the adult brain. The limbic brain is the child brain. That is our emotional memory. It's the do whatever you want brain. It's where we were as children. And then we have a connector or a bridge called the corpus callosum. So that connects the right and left side of the brain. So some people who have remained in trauma and have never grown up and developed wise decision-making capacity, or have to have instant gratification, really remain most of their life in the limbic brain. So this is very simplistic, I know, but if you remember that being just in the limbic brain without the cortex does not make for a balanced life. Just staying in the limbic brain with a child's brain, with being in the adult body, you're going to have a very imbalanced life. So Tim Fletcher has done a really good job, and I would really agree with him on particular lesson that there are 16 balls that we have to adjust if you take the main categories in this adult life. Now, some of them may not apply to your situation because not everybody listening is going to be a parent or a grandparent, but there's still people out there that we need to report to, take care of, and so forth. So if we are in recovery of some type, let's say that we are in codependency recovery, let's say we're in the 12-step groups, let's say that we're just working on ourselves, grief recovery, divorce care, anything at all. Number one, we have to be in what's called a recovery mindset and doing the activities that will let us do that if we're going to stay on track. Because as we all know, if we lose our recovery, everything falls apart. This can be being careful with our money, with our diet, with our health, having a heart operation, whatever that might be. And then secondly, we'll have a job that requires a certain number of hours a week or a day. And then we have physical needs. We have to eat, we have to sleep a certain length of time, then we need to exercise. We have intellectual curiosity and needs need to be fed, learning. We need to be thinking about things. We have spiritual needs, emotional needs, just managing our emotions. Sometimes it's a full-time order, right? If we get triggered during the day. We have to be aware of our emotions, think about how to express our emotions if it's not too late. We have to think about it. We have to deal with the emotions of other people, and that can be something where we really lose time. If we have a partner, or if we're in a very close or committed relationship, we've got that person, so we need to learn how to communicate. We need to learn how to resolve conflict, perhaps keep the fun alive. When you have fun together, we need to build connection, be present to each other, do stuff together. And then if a person is in a position of being a parent to children, they are certainly a responsibility. And then as young parents find out, wow, when number 2, number 3, maybe number 4, whatever comes along, it just stacks up. The more children you have, the more time it takes to connect with each child and to build a relationship with each unique child and understand them. And then, if this weren't enough, we have friends. Friends really take time. It takes time to maintain relationships and do things with them. And then, if that weren't enough, we do have a family. Most of us do, some people don't. So this could be biological, extended family, and all the aunts and uncles and sisters and brothers and cousins that includes. And it may or may not be the case that you feel a certain amount of responsibility in those areas. I know many people that feel zero responsibility at all for their family members, and I know many people who feel an inordinate, overwhelming amount of responsibility for lots of family members. So you have the two extremes and everything in between. Okay, hobbies. Hopefully you might have some hobbies, some things that you just enjoy doing for your downtime, for your own self-care. And then you might want to develop some skills. It may be that your profession or your job requires this. It may be just something that you want to learn how to do. It may be that you're faced with something on the computer or something in the digital field that maybe you don't want to learn, but you really know you need to learn how to do that, and so you take this on. Maybe you have a deep down desire to be of service, to volunteer, to really give back, to be involved in a group activity with some other people to feel part of. And then we've got maintenance. Some of these things we dread. Can't always call Maytag, we can't always call the handyman, we can't always find somebody to help us get our stuff fixed. So this growing awareness of the more that we own, the more we buy, the more we have to maintain is something that I hear about a lot. A home, it takes a lot of work to maintain. inside and outside. A car, multiple cars, just different types of possessions that require care. And then the big one that I've not mentioned so far, that is mentioned very directly over 800 times in the Bible. It begins with an M. Anybody got a guess? Money. Money. Manage your money. Manage your finances so that you're not in debt. So all of that, and then we gotta factor in what is the most important. And considering today is Sunday, it's the Sabbath for many people, rest. Rest is so important. I read a scripture in the Message by Eugene Peterson last week that said, God delights in giving rest to his loved ones. And I thought, now that's something that is a spiritual prescription to the guilt that we feel when we give ourselves the gift of rest. It is not a luxury, it is an essential. So that's a lot of different responsibilities. Thing is, in those 16 areas, if one of those suffers, not immediately, but pretty soon, the whole thing will start to suffer. So it's really like you have to have these 16 responsibilities sort of laid out in front of you. I'm talking about ideally, and I'm going to show you how to do that. So that requires balance and skill and awareness. And taking it beyond just those 16 areas to have you think about it. Tim Fletcher does a wonderful, wonderful talk on this, and I just want to quote from him as he shares about his own life doing an international school and program in all of these countries, and he has three grown children. He says, what I realize in my own life, and you will realize it in your life, I need to find a balance between alone time and time with people. I need time alone, but I need social connection. I need other relationships, but what I know about myself is I need a certain amount of alone time. If I have too little alone time, I suffer. If I have too much alone time, I suffer. If I don't get enough connection with people, I suffer. So I need to figure out the right amount of alone time and the right amount of connection. But then, what is significant is my wife's amount of alone time is different from what I need. And her connection and social time is different from what I need. And I know both of them, so that is really true. He is much more of an introvert, she's much more of an extrovert. So he says her balance is different than my balance in those areas, so I've got to figure that out. Then the relationship that I have with my wife or my kids or close friends, I may need deep time of sharing, like really feeling like you've connected on an intimate level. But I don't want all my relationships to be about deep sharing. We just need to have fun together. We need like just surface, light talk, light sharing. That is a very important balance between deep sharing and light. This reminded me that I often will have people that will say, I have no use for chit chat. I want to just be all deep. Or people that want everything just right here. There's no balance on their communications. They're very cognizant, of that, but they are having a lot of relationship problems. They don't know who they are, but their loved ones are talking to me about it generally. So every relationship is a little bit different. So the big one I mentioned, the money thing, we have to figure out a balance with money. So here's some questions that we always ask ourselves as adults, being in our wise cortex. What do I do with extra money? Do I go spend it, or do I put some in savings? Do I give it away? We're all thinking about this as we prep for our taxes. I spent all yesterday afternoon with all these questions. Where do I find a balance between giving some, saving some, spending some? So what that looks like for me in my personal life and my business life is going to look very different than it will for each one of you, but we all have to find a balance that's necessary to find. So if we are in the situation of being in a coupleship or being married, and if there are children, adult or small, there's this whole balance between self-care, meeting our own needs, but also being a parent figure or a caretaker, and getting our own needs met and sacrificing where we need to, but meeting the basic needs of the other person. And that's really hard to find a balance. Also with friends, there's finding that balance between people where our time is mainly listening to them, giving to them, supporting them, encouraging them. And some people feel guilty about saying this about their friends, but the truth is some people are extremely draining. Extremely draining. And the other truth is there are a lot of our friends that are just not. You think of a person where you just feel rejuvenated after you have been with them. You feel like your best self. You feel like you have a couple of gems after you've been with them. You feel like, oh, I could go for a brisk walk. I can't wait till I get with them again. So all of these people are friends, but we all have our differences. So if you have too many friends who are what are called maybe need friends, I did not say that with a Y, I said N-E-E-D, need friends. That's accurate. We're going to burn out. We are going to burn out. So we need the right balance between friends where I give and support, and then friends who have the capacity, the maturity, something that they would like to give to me, who probably are people who live a balanced life, so they're able to do that. So spending time with friends versus the needs of my family. How do I make that balance? All right, so how do we find balance between friends and family where our family or kids are not going to feel neglected or resent the fact that we just spent time with friends or outside parties? So we need the right balance of spending time with people. Just being able to enjoy wonderful gifts, like food, like travel, like all the pleasures that God gives us, but also knowing that we need self-discipline. And so there's times that we need to deny ourselves indulging in these things, or just a lot of people that I know are just like, oh my gosh, I watched, episode 2, and 3, and 4, and 5, and it was 2 o'clock in the morning, I couldn't get up for work, but why, Anne, do I do this every day? We do explore those reasons, and, how do I begin to exert discipline? How do I find a balance between denying myself and enjoying some of the fun things in life that I need? How do I do that? So if I'm going to be a healthy person, we take that further and we just realize that we're going to have some days where we've got so many things on our to-do list, but we do need time to rest. We do need downtime. And so what we generally do, we go through this debate in our head, and here's what we say. We look at this list and we go, okay, do I do one more thing, and then do I relax? We're already exhausted, so we're looking at the list, right? I do one more thing, and then do I relax? Or, no, I've got to relax now and just say, that's just going to have to wait. Got to figure out that balance in my life. We talked about several weeks ago about in a family environment in the home, studies have shown that it's good for about 75% of the positive experiences in the family to have something to do with the limbic brain. Positive emotion, happy, play. This is for young children. So part of parenting involves giving them positive feedback, but also at some point they need to be given some sort of negative feedback. So for a parent, having to balance the positive feedback and the encouragement they give them versus confronting them and pointing out their flaws. So do you see right here, this is very difficult in balancing. And also when perfectionism comes in, living with the limitations of time and energy, there's a lot of times where we look at something and we think, okay, I can't do this perfectly. I want to do it my best, but this is hopeless, I can't do it perfectly. But I have to do my best within the time I have available to do this job. I've got other things to do. I've got other jobs in the pipeline. So now, doing my best has to be defined by the amount of time that I have. So when I work with people that have obsessive compulsive tendencies and great perfectionism, this is how we work and we redefine. And you have to have a new definition of excellence. This is now your new definition, the amount of time you have. And that's a really hard curve if they're older. So this balance thing is absolutely essential, complex, and complicated. A nod to my mother when this came up when she was going back to get her master's in counseling when we were small. We'd go to the playground, she'd point out the seesaw, give it level, test the kids, and go, this is balance. You must have a balanced life. Balance. Try to stand on the end and you stand on the other. Just do it. Just balance. So not only did I think it was supposed to be very simple and I couldn't do it for anything, the balance thing kept coming up as when we were at home. Girls, balance, seek balance, seek balance. And there was nothing balanced to look at. So I was constantly very confused about, okay, I could go and look at a ballerina on TV and look at that seesaw, but then I never saw anything else because both our parents were extreme workaholics and we came from a chemical substance situation. So this lesson has been so important for me to go back on in terms of kind of caring for my inner child, and periods of great confusion have really kind of come alive for me personally as I have looked back at those memories like, why didn't I get it? Why didn't I get it? Why didn't I get it? So this is why you have a difference between a healthy family and a complex trauma family, because healthy parents help kids figure out what does the balanced life, the word, what does that really look like? It's not like a static image. What would it look like in that child's life given their unique or individual personality? So if you came from complex trauma, either simple, compound, whatever it is, you know the definition by now, like me, you probably didn't get that. So let's talk about how that environment messes with the idea. And I've just given you a real personal insight into my own sort of messed up picture where I just could never get it. So it doesn't give you the tools you need. And some of you may find this kind of discouraging, this next part, but I want you to know you were sitting right here, or you were sitting right out there somewhere in our digital world. We want to wrap you up in our warm little classroom right here with us. So just picture yourself here with us, that you're a survivor and you're a thriver, and you're here and you're hearing it today, and it's never too late. There was another girl that was in my first Al-Anon group in my teens, and we were the youngest. Most everybody was like 40 and above, and because we had 2 family members go to treatment, and the older ones called us the scramblers, and we said, I don't understand, what does that mean by that? And they said, you girls are doing nothing but just scrambling in life, just to survive, to take care of everybody, just to keep up. You can't heal while you're scrambling. So this is important. To be in survival mode, or scramble mode, same thing, means you can't be balanced. Let's go back to my example. Scramble mode and dictated be balanced. It is an impossible way to live. There's no way you can do it. So that leads to a lot of other things and problems. So complex trauma means living in survival or scramble mode. So it means that you live the life out of balance. The second thing is that survival mode means always living in your limbic brain. So what we know at this point is that when our limbic brain gets triggered, it wants to do things that give you instant gratification or protection. Alright? Because you're always hypervigilant. I have to protect myself now. I have to feel better now. I have to fix this now. There's always danger now. So, over time, that limbic brain wants to do things that create an even greater imbalance than what's going on. So the inside, you're getting even greater imbalance. Things become worse. You just can't depend on your limbic brain to be a reliable guide in finding balance. Here's some examples that Tim Fletcher has come up with. These are different types of homes, because it's kind of like a fingerprint. Everybody's so unique, but I just would be curious, those of you listening, which you may relate to one, but you may relate to a combination. If you grew up in chaos, there was no balance, no organization, and no structure if it was just chaos. Or did you grow up in rigid structure with control freak parents where everything was regulated? That's not balance either. But it looked like balance because it was clear. Some of you grew up in a family where the whole focus was just meeting your physical needs. And the parents thought because they met your physical needs well that they taught you balance. You didn't know that anything was missing. However, they ignored your emotional needs, your spiritual needs, your intellectual needs. And so without even realizing it, you were out of balance. Other households, children are made to feel that their emotional needs were all that mattered. So the child felt balanced and soothed, but that was a very distorted view. Some of us had parents who were totally out of balance in their own life. They were workaholics, which meant that they were emotionally unavailable. So they may have neglected us, they weren't present. Some of us had parents who were addicts. They were consumed by their addiction and were totally out of balance. Some of us, many of us, had parents who were in survival mode themselves because of abusive relationships, and they were out of balance. Some of us had parents who just went overboard in everything they did, and when they found a new thing they liked, they just did it 110%. And the children may have been neglected, out of balance. I see many people who had parents who were totally obsessed with their image. And so life was about externals, never about internals. Out of balance. Also parents who were trying to find balance but couldn't. So you might have had a mother who was constantly overeating and then went from one diet to another, totally obsessed with this diet, out of balance, in the 60s and 70s, this was just so problematic. It just led to our great problems today. Some of you came from homes where there was no balance emotionally. I really related to this, being only allowed to show positive, happy emotions. You couldn't be sad, you couldn't express anger, you couldn't express confusion. So your emotional life was out of balance. So complex trauma does not create balance, and it does not give you the tools to have balance. Now, that doesn't mean you're behind the 8 ball. You're late. It very, very quickly you can amass the skills to begin to find balance. It's just one of these building blocks in here. I didn't get what I needed. What is it that I need? What do I need to start practicing? Well, I think the 16 areas are really important. And it's not about you. This is not shame or being deficient in any way. We simply have not been shown. I thought balance was a picture that I could never attain. Well, I worked really, really hard and help other people to try to find balance. So you might at this point be saying to yourself, is balance really this important like you're saying it is? I'm not really yet convinced. Well, I love quotes, inspiring quotes, and so does Tim Fletcher. So let me read some quotes that show the importance of balance. Thomas Martin, a famous writer, says this: happiness is not a matter of intensity, which is what complex trauma people think, intensity. Happiness is a matter of balance and order and rhythm and harmony. I would agree to that, and that you can't be truly happy unless you're balanced. Another author has said this: balance is a feeling derived from being whole and complete. So when you're balanced, you can become whole and complete. It's a sense of harmony. It's essential to maintaining quality in life and work. So if you want to get to a point of feeling whole and complete, you've got to be balanced, because you've got to meet all of the different needs. Another one, this life is about balance. Too much and too little can kill you. Another one, when our life is out of balance, we have stress. So a life out of balance increases stress. And lastly, one author said this, and I would say one, because I hear this all the time: I have no balance, my life is nothing but a hot mess. That's kind of the slang or vernacular of the day. My life is nothing but a hot mess. Most people will say to me, I'm just a hot mess. I go, no. You feel like a hot mess, but you have to stay a hot mess. So, how much do you give of yourself, including volunteer activities? You won't do anybody any good if you're stretched too thin. In other words, if you're not balanced with self-care versus giving and helping others. gonna burn out and be no good to anybody. So balance is essential for being effective in life. Another quote, without balance, a life is no longer worth the effort. And I see a lot of people get there, they follow the be good, the golden rule, the twistings that we have of the good Southern lady and gentleman, and a lot of distortions and twisting of religion, whatever that might be, and just right down that little rabbit dark hole into depression and physical and mental exhaustion. So I'm going to give you just a little checklist right here to give you some signs that your life might be out of balance. And this is not totally comprehensive, but this is just a simple one. And it's a good educational format, and one that I use often because when I start feeling off, this is the one that I use. About 30 years ago, I was introduced to a couple of instruments, one called the PCI, Personal Craziness Index, so that I could look at my end point and then back it up a lot so I never get there. What are my first little signs and what do I do? And that has been unbelievable. So here goes. Number one, when your to-do list appears to be the size of the Empire State Building, in other words, you've been focusing too much on one thing and everything else just keeps piling up. More and more and more things you need to get done. You feel like you're really busy, but you're not accomplishing anything. You feel burned out. You're constantly tired. You have headaches or other physical and emotional signs of stress. So for a lot of people, when their life is starting to get out of balance, they will manifest physical pain, headaches, muscle pain, emotions are affected, especially depression, even low level, anxiety. You feel like you're living somebody else's schedule. You feel like you've lost your direction. Starting things but not finishing them. All kinds of projects you started but never finished. Some areas of your life are totally neglected. Physical health could be suffering. It's not unusual for me to hear that, I just realized I haven't been to the dentist in 2 years. I've been taking care of my elderly parent. Something like that. It just never crossed their mind. Relationships can be in total disarray because they're totally neglected. One thing that's pretty common, being consumed by a new fun activity and just putting all their time into that, but neglecting all the other relationships. Kind of like the brain is hijacked. The limbic brain just goes in and takes over. And say the next 2 months are away on hiking trips, and I'm sure the rest of the world will figure it out. Well, by that time there's a lot of things that they need to take care of before they'll be in a position to do that. Difficulty sleeping because the brain's so busy, not eating properly. So eating and sleeping aren't happening as the two foundational parts of life to give proper energy. Super duper sugar, carbs, not enough protein to fuel, just out of touch with what they're putting in their body. Struggling to be present with other people because the mind's got so many things happening. Making impulsive or unwise decisions because the mind's starting to panic. Kind of like the mind feeling like a pinball machine or hamster on the wheel. One thing that we notice too is when all of a sudden it's been 2 or 3 weeks and significant people that we're in touch with, maybe every other day, 2 or 3 times a week, don't hear from that person. So, sometimes it's said, well, so and so, they just go dark, they just do this, they're off the rails. We know they'll come back. Then other times it's like, wow, this is really getting to be a problem. It's just a really good sign that they're out of balance. Losing our motivation, over a period of time. I'm not talking about, a week or so. We all have those times when we just, in times of our life when we just put things down and we go a while before we pick them back up. That's rhythm. But just losing motivation to do the things we most need to do to be healthy. So, if we say, oh, I'm out of balance, let me take that further, what does that feel like emotionally? What are the emotions that come up inside me when my life is out of balance? What you'll see is that it's really hard to find a positive one, right? When my life is out of balance, I'm feeling some pretty negative emotions. And along with that, I start to feel some guilt because I am saying, ooh, forgot to do that. I've got to do that. And when I'm answering people's questions, I'm saying, I haven't gotten to do that yet. Whoops, right? So my internal guilt goes up, my anxiety goes up. How am I going to cover all this? I promised people I would do these things. So some people just go numb. They just kind of check out because they don't want to feel those feelings. And then just the frustration on other people. They want to accomplish that. They want to be caught up. That's their goal. But increased frustration means increased anger. And definitely you're more irritable. And then some people just kind of end up in heat. I see this a lot, which is kind of this whole existential question. I'm not fulfilling my calling in life. I'm not pursuing, what it is I'm called to do. I'm just running around like a chicken with my head cut off. My life's being wasted. I'm not reaching my potential. So they just go in this drain, down to shame. They just can't see that there's a logical way out. They just go down here. I'm such a failure. I'm not good enough. So, all these things can happen depending on the temperament of the person. And it's just really interesting because if you looked at those 16 things and somebody kind of knew how to look at it with another person and really take an inventory and see where they've gotten out of balance, they can begin to correct it or correct their thinking or correct their life pattern with a misunderstanding and take some steps to begin to remedy it instead of it all being one big horrible mess where they've totally missed the boat on what their creators call them to do, or so they think in their mind. People get very far afield. So, here are some tools. And another quote, balance is not something you find, it's something that you create. And that requires that we take ownership of this process. Balance is the result of you making decisions about how to use your time. Not other people, but you making decisions on how to use your time. It's a result of dealing with your issue, not other people's issues, but your issue, so that you can start making healthier decisions. It starts from dealing with your own internal world rather than trying to figure out the internal worlds of other people. This will all translate into your external world. I'm going to read that again, but I think that's very profound. Balance is the result of you making decisions about how to use your time, the result of dealing with your issues, so that you can start making healthier decisions. So it starts from getting your internal world more healthy. All that translates into your external world. So balance begins by learning to manage ourselves before it's about managing our time. You see why a lot of time management programs don't work. dealt with that. I've never had this information, and they're giving this program, and they fail, and they fail, and they fail. I find the same thing with food issues with people, or any of the other addictions. We haven't learned to manage ourselves. So, here's where we start asking ourselves, okay, here's a whole bunch of possible reasons. Am I out of balance because I've been living in my limbic brain so that everything has been to where I just want instant gratification or instant protection? Well, maybe. So if I'm in my limbic brain that's running the show, I'm never going to be balanced if that's what's going on here. So I need to get out of my limbic brain back in my cortex. So I need grounding. Grounding is what we do when we do our breathing. Sorry guys, I forgot to do the breathing at the very beginning. I was so excited about getting this topic, but we do our centered breathing, our noticing, our presence. That's our mindfulness. I'm being curious about why I'm out of balance. What is going on inside me? So first, am I in my limbic brain? What happens if you're in your limbic brain? I go back to my old behaviors. Okay, so when it brought up the childhood memories of this, about going back to the seesaw and the ballet dancer and the confusion. I mean, I was probably 7 years old right there, remembering something I had remembered since I was 7, working on this lesson, right? And I felt horribly confused. It was not a pleasant feeling. But, as I always tell people, we have to feel it in order to have it healed. And then I was able to have tremendous compassion for my self inside and gratitude for this information. So you say, am I going back to some old behaviors? And if I am, that's not a good thing. That is not going to have a good result. It's always going to result in greater imbalance. So I need to know that most of my old behaviors will be about numbing myself, distracting myself, being in confusion. So you could say, I'm not balanced because I was never taught what balance was. Going back to my original example. Maybe some people will say, I was never taught how to organize. I was never taught how to organize finances. Maybe somebody, I can't imagine this, but some children will say, we never had chores at our house. Daddy always bought me everything I wanted. I never had to clean up my room. It just magically appeared. Or you might say, the reason is I'm not balanced is because I'm afraid to say no to people. I have never, ever been able to set boundaries with people. So if they ask me to do something, I just always say yes, and then I'm out of balance because I just always, if I don't have too much on a plate and I'm not busy, then I get depressed. This is what a lot of people say. So if I don't learn how to set boundaries, I will never be balanced. And I am so afraid of disappointing people or saying no or getting people mad at me. But I've come to the point of where I'm willing to do that. And that means dealing with my shame. So I'm never going to be balanced if I don't deal with my shame. And for some people, I always have the thought that I can do everything and I have no limitations. There are lots of people who really feel that way about themselves. I just keep taking things on when I'm feeling good. That's the limbic brain being totally in charge. So they have to learn what their limitations are, that they can't do everything. So I want to end today by saying that I think that learning what balance is for you is going to be, and I'd be happy to give you a list of these 16 things, but sitting down with a coach or someone you trust and taking a thorough inventory of those 16 areas of your life and the hours each day or each you devote to those things, and where your time, just like your money. I had to sit down with someone the other day who underlying anxiety was they had absolutely no idea where their money had ever gone, where it was going now, where it was coming from. You know, that's one of the first things with people that I will often address. And they're so embarrassed and ashamed about that. But the good, healthy control that it gives them once they know and have looked at it in a safe place, all kinds of things are possible. All kinds of things are possible. So blessings to each one of you this week. I hope this information has been helpful to you, and be happy to continue any discussion.